back to Pacific Coast Highway.
Continue on California 1 North for 13 miles.
Highway 1. I drove for last 40 miles along the Russian River, and I have to say that was one of the prettiest parts I saw on this my trip so far. There's a couple little small towns, also very cute Russian River town, really small, but a lot of camping, a lot of resorts, really nice, woods everywhere, so pretty. And there you have it, Russian River. This town is called Jenner, and it's on the coast.
Arriving at Jenner.
So this is where Russian River goes into Pacific. Well, I found a spot to stop for a moment and enjoy this beauty. And that's Russian River going into Pacific Ocean. This is a state park, and you have to pay, I think it's $8. So pick up the envelope here. So just complete the information and put the payment in the drop box here. And put the receipt in the window. That's the instructions. And it was used by a Russian-American company from Alaska that brought natives from Alaska to help here establish farming and hunting for sea lions and seals and whales. The museum shows the old days. This was working since 1812 to 1841. Probably then Mexico took over. Here it was a Russian-American company, a commercial trading company from Siberia, moved from Siberia to St. Petersburg. And shareholders included high officials, court nobility, and members of the Tsar's family. So it's a Russian but a company in America. It's not a Russian-American corporation. So Russian Navy was involved there, and they came from Alaska with brought the natives to help them here. So by 1840, the Mexicans took over. Says the settlement had no resident priest, but in 1836 Father Veniaminov visited Fort Ross and conducted marriage, baptism, and other religious services. So there was not much profit from hunting, and they also developed agriculture, farm, and the goal was to grow the food to send to Alaska. That was later sold to US, really cheap.
this piece of Northern California coastline. Russian. Perched on a flat bluff overlooking a sheltered Pacific cove is Fort Ross, now a California State Historic Park. From 1812 through 1841, Fort Ross was Russia's southernmost settlement in America. Founded as a base for hunting fur seal and sea otter, it also grew food for Russian colonies in Alaska. It evolved into a center for farming, ranching, timber harvests, and shipbuilding. Established a base at Bodega Bay, some 60 miles north of the Spanish Presidio of San Francisco, where he made contact with the Coast Miwok people. Nearby, he found plentiful fresh water, timber, pasture, and farmland. In 1812, Kuskov moved his base further up the coast to a site not easily accessible or vulnerable to attack by the Spanish, nor was it near British claims further north. He was accompanied by 25 Russians, mostly craftsmen, and 80 Alaskan natives who brought along 40 Baidarkas for hunting.
In the beginning of 1800s, when all nations start looking for new land that they can claim, Russians start moving east to Siberia and over to Alaska, went down to Sitka. They established their hunting bases, hunting seals. There was not enough food there based on the climate on Alaska, so they start moving south looking for a better land that they can use to produce the food and send back to Alaska. That's how they came here. In 1812, they arrived, 40 Russians and 80 natives from Alaska that brought their equipment and kayaks to be used here to hunt. They started building the property and developed the fort, and managers were sent based on orders from Russia. They were hunting seals and start developing orchard with different kind of trees, peaches, apples. Also tried to grow wheat and corn, but that didn't work because of the climate and the closeness of Pacific Ocean. Ranch had a lot of sheep and cattle, and they were sending food and wool to Alaska. The fifth manager that was sent here, Roshchev or something like that, built a house that still exists today and brought the wife and the family and described this as an enchanting place that he didn't want to leave when in 1941 he got the order to sell it. He was very sad to leave it. He fell in love with California and this property. There was a chapel built here, but there was no priest, just visiting priests coming. And that's why probably they didn't do forced conversion and baptism for Indians. And that's why local Indians were in much better relationship with them than at the other places like around missions that Spanish built. I think it would be interesting to see this from the air, one of the drone shots. I don't have a drone, so I have to steal somebody's work. So here's the entrance to the fort. On this side, out of the walls, lived the Russians that came from Alaska. And on the other side of the fort lived the native Alaskans. Those two, because they came together, they start mixing and getting married and producing family, and they were called Creoles. Inside the fort lived the officials, manager, and the soldiers, and officials from the Russian-American company. So that's the house of the last manager, Rothschild, and the chapel. Chapel was destroyed in an earthquake, the walls fell down, and it was rebuilt several times.
There was over 20 buildings here on the property. And this is probably just recreated to show how the life was. And like I said, only officials from the company lived here on the property, inside the walls. And Russian Orthodox icons. Look at this location. Look at it. And down the beach. There were two of these block houses on opposite diagonal corners. They were 8-sided and they had cannons. This one was looking on the ocean to prevent Spanish from coming from the sea, and the other one is controlling left and right the terrain. They had over 40 cannons here, and there's a couple leftovers. Finally, in 1842, the property was sold to Sutter from Sacramento, and he sent his trusted assistants, Otto Bennett, to handle everything and transport the sheep, cattle, everything movable to his own fort that he built. Later, in 1873, George Cole bought this property and developed it to a very big, large, successful ranch. And the Fort Ross became the social center for this area. Chapel was used to perform weddings, marriages and stuff. Chapel is a part of a settlement founded by Russians in 1812 and known as Fort Ross. Fort Ross contained 59 buildings, 9 of which included this chapel were within the enclosure. The Russians withdrew in 1841, tablet placed by the native sons of the Golden West. So the chapel walls were destroyed it cracked, fell down, but the roof was okay in the earthquake. So right now there's no decorations, and this is interesting. Kushkov House. This was manager's home from 1812 to 1838. A lot of weapons. the gunpowder. The Cole family residence. George Cole and his Chilean wife Mercedes Leiva bought this in 1873, and they built the house outside of the fort walls. It was next to it, but outside. And here's the first windmill built in America, built by Russians. It was used to grind corn and stuff, grain. So that was a nice visit. I like the place.